Well, I'm going to get started. I'd like to call the Maple Run Unified School District Board of Directors meeting for June 26, 2024 to order. The time is 6 o'clock. We're at the central office. And looking at the agenda, there's only one change that I would like to make, and you guys got an email about it. It's changing what is called 6B to student data presentation. And that's the only change I'll have. We will need to go into executive session after we have a finding that we need to go into executive session a little bit later. So no other revisions. The agenda is accepted with that one revision unless there are objections. Hearing none, we'll move on. Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me for a Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
I know, I just put it back.
Okay, we're in the visitor section of our agenda. Are there any visitors in the room that would like to address the board that are not scheduled to address the board?
Yes, absolutely.
There's a person raising their hand.
Yes, there is. Right here.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
I'm Dan Pipes. I'm from Fairfield. How much time will I have?
Well, let me read you a little prelude here, and
Please.
if you'll get to find out. So the public comment visitor section of the meeting is an opportunity for community members to address issues of concern about policy, budget, or administrative matters, or to share ideas about how we can work together to improve our schools. We value input and respect divergent views. We ask you to limit your remarks to time constraints prescribed by me, which are 3 minutes per topic, and refrain from airing, excuse me, I gotta turn page here, grievances with individual members of the school community, including respecting the privacy of the students and parents. There are those that can also attend remotely, and they may speak. They just don't have to put their name in the comment section, and we'll address them after we address the people here in person. So, sir, you may have 3 minutes, and I'm going to set my timer when you start talking.
Excellent. I imagine I'll be giving you time back unless someone has questions.
Yeah.
Dan,
Where do you need to go?
Okay. So we get it on, so it's great on this. Great. All right.
So, starting now?
Yeah, can you state your name and where you're from?
Sure, my name is Dan Pipes. I'm from Fairfield. And what I have to share with you tonight falls squarely under the sharing ideas portion of the opportunity that we have here. So, right up front, I'd like to encourage create and implement a policy that bans smartphones for students at school during the school day. This is an issue that crosses all political and ideological lines. Does anyone here believe that cell phones during the school day are a net positive for our children as they focus on learning? Much of the social angst that seems to grow each year can be directly attributed to platforms that allow bullying and detract from learning. Some states and cities, California and Florida lead to mind, are enacting bans. And these states can't be farther apart politically, but both recognize the dangers of cell phones in the classroom. The details certainly will take some time to work out. Perhaps you can review other states and cities that are doing this currently and adopt a policy that makes the most sense for our district. So that's the first thing that I'd like to share. Secondly, I was looking at your website, and there's a lot of information there, but I don't know where I can find how the children in our school districts perform in the fundamental skills of reading, writing, arithmetic, history, perhaps a couple other things. I'm wondering how many kids read at grade level at math, or they read or do math at grade level, to name two skills that are obviously critical for future success. Are these metrics something that can be posted in your report section so that parents can track the educational achievements and the trends in all of our schools across the years? And further, how can we compare our kids' achievements with the rest of Vermont, New England, and the nation? Perhaps this could be part of your annual report, a baseline to establish to allow taxpayers and parents to ensure that our contributions are producing results that probably would go a long way to ending the, seems to be the annual friction over school budgets. If any of you want my contact info for follow-on or have comments or questions, I'm happy to give it to you. Ma'am, how much time do I have left?
24, 3 seconds.
I'm going to yield that, I'll yield that back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, questions, comments?
Dan, I'm the superintendent.
Eric,
If
did
you
you get
could-
his contact information?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna ask.
What do you need?
Thank you.
Any questions while I'm scribbling away? You guys can let me off so easy.
Dan, I'll just say someone will be in contact with you by the end of the week.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I'm not tethered to my phone, so be patient with me. Anything else? I really appreciate
No,
it.
sir, thank you.
Dan, I would say
Appreciate your comments.
one of your comments, if you wanted to stay for a report that's being given on that exact topic,
Okay,
it's happening
great.
in a few
Right.
minutes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's a good intro to the report that's coming up that you might be happy to watch.
I wasn't aware of that. This is fortuitous. Absolutely.
Just coincidence. But there's
Yeah,
no
that's great. I will stay with that, certainly.
Any other folks in the room that wish to address us?
Nobody else in the room.
All alone and unafraid.
I haven't heard any, I'm not hearing anything. Anybody online, John? Or where
No.
the man?
No one
Person
online knows
named the computer. Okay, seeing and hearing none, I'm going to move on. Next item is the consent agenda. We have 3 items on that: minutes, media packet, and staff changes. Does anyone need to pull any of these out for discussion? Hearing none, the consent agenda is accepted without objection. Next, item 6A is the student board representative report. And it looks like we've got Leah and her entourage that I can kind of see. Oh, big entourage. Thank you so much all for coming. And I understand that there is a video presentation. So Leah, I'll let you introduce it and share your information.
Yeah, so, yeah, Jacoby, go.
Hello everyone, I'm Jacoby Soder. I am one of the student board reps and I'm on the student voice committee, and we've just put together our findings from throughout the whole year around the district goals. We've been collecting feedback in the forms of in-person interview dialogues. We've been doing like surveys, virtual surveys, in-person surveys, going to certain events, etc. And that's just a little bit of what we've been doing. So the Student Voice Committee saw extreme value in holding in-person interviews with a variety of students. Our interviews were shown at strategic planning meetings, and the interviews were a driving force in leading conversations about what our goal talking points could be. We decided that in our second round of interviews, because we did these same things last year, which set the stage for the strategic plan, we would have each district goal this time be its own different segment, and ask open-ended questions to students and some staff members about the goals to gather more raw, in-depth feedback on BFA's current position on each goal.
So, if we go to the next slide, and we're just looking at our timeline, and I know lot of people probably have seen it, or if you followed along for the past 2 years. Kind of what we're looking at is starting with our listening sessions last year, although this group did not formally run them, and Mr. Kimball and Ms. Rushlow did a lot of help with that. We were kind of there, and we saw the value in asking the clubs and going to a lot of meetings with the kids and the students all throughout the school and asking them what's working, what's not going well, and that's where we saw those goals come up from. And so this year we were like, why don't we just continue this great thing that was started in the district, and why don't we run it as students? So that's what we did, and us four, as well as some other students that are back on the SVC, went around and asked clubs and asked students, you know, what are these goals? Here's some goals that the district made. What does it look like? What does it mean to you? And that's what we're going to be presenting, those 5 goals today. But this started 2 years ago, so we've really been working hard at it, and this has been a really long process. And the interviews and kind of the point of them was to show the board like really raw stories as well, and real kids speaking back to everyone, and maybe picking some students that we might have missed that were not completely heard throughout those listening sessions. And we did that through the NCTC digital media class, so big thank you to them. They've done that again for 2 years. And we think it's really, really beneficial. And we saw that last year when we gave our presentation on the interviews at the community summit, and we thought it went really, really well. And then a good example of that is the bias and behavior kind of work that they've been doing. Reese Kelly's been helping a lot with that, and it really, I feel personally, it really struck from those students that gave those reports in the listening sessions that we did. So,
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Sure. Your 4th bullet point go back one slide. Oh, there it is, that slide.
It's supposed to be compelling.
That's what I thought. I was like, is that a word I'm
Yeah,
not aware of?
it's supposed to be compelling.
Okay, I thought that may be the case. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then we just wanted to give a disclosure of our process. So our presentation you will see is less than 1% of all the feedback that we've gathered today, and less than 1% in the 3 hours of footage. We have about 10 minutes of footage in total, and we had 3+ hours of footage that we went through. So what we did was we took the most direct answers we got from questions and what we would thought could be the most effective responses to the questions to get the point across. But just know that there are lots of participants not represented in the video. There are lots of participants not necessarily directly represented in the data that we're going to present to you. But this has been the process of almost all the clubs, many students, staff, to really bring this together over the last year and really the past 2 years. Then we just asked, respect the participants. They went out of their comfort zone to meet with us and be interviewed. And it was really great to see so many people, for the first time, really being yes, I really want to be, shown to the board, shown in all this, and that was really cool to see. So,
We're
yeah.
also not editors, because some of
Yeah.
the stuff we edited.
Yeah, we edited some of it,
Yeah,
so
there.
it's gonna look like,
My aesthetic is not always pleasing,
Yeah.
which is this slide, so there's a lot
Yeah.
of, yeah, you're good. So I did rigorous academics and expectations, so I just copy and pasted. This is from our listening session. So basically we went to each club and we said, what does it look like when you meet the goal above? All students are feeling supported and excel in traditional and non-traditional opportunities based on their individual needs and strengths. And this is some of the report that we got back, which Ms. Rushlow did an amazing job of giving us bullet points here. So what we did is we took those and then we created some questions to ask our interviewees. So if you can see just some of these bullet points, some of them are P, AP classes, honors programs, a lot about academics and what students really need to feel challenged and feel pushed to go further. And a lot of these are really positive, and a lot of them are really, really obtainable. So we're excited for that. So if you go to the next slide, some of the questions we pulled from this that you might see. What's your favorite class? What makes you want to go to school? Why are you trying in high school? Motivation. What are the classes you really want? We really want to just push those further. So we're asking questions that we want students to see what we want to expand. We want to talk about COVID. We want to ask, how our grading system looks, because these are big ticket questions and hopefully something that we can make a positive impact to. So I have my video if you want to watch that. See how I did. Here it is.
Expectation for rigor. Academic rigor is not necessarily like more work. You know what I mean? I feel like sometimes the cultural expectation for rigor across a lot of people is like, oh, if it's rigorous, then it's a lot more work, right? And so a lot more work can go along with academic rigor. But to me, academic rigor is more about finding where the student is academically and then pushing them further. And trying to do that as best as you can at an individual level, keeping in mind you have 20 or 25 or 27 students in a room, and you've got to move that entire group forward too. You know what I mean?
Since COVID, I've noticed that I've gotten a lot lazier with my schoolwork and prioritizing other things that are not as important in my free time. I've also noticed a lot of shortcuts that I've taken, which is not a good thing, and I'm working on that.
It's nothing special. I just definitely think it set me back.
Yeah, it
Because
definitely.
because COVID happened when I was in 5th grade, and when I came back to 6th grade, I don't know, I just felt like I was so behind and I didn't know what to do.
It's one of the main teachers I feel supported by.
Yeah, he actually tries to be friends with you, so just date.
That's definitely helpful. And does he make you want to come to school?
Yeah.
Shit, nah.
No.
I'm keeping up. No.
What would make you want to come?
It's not the reason I don't want to go. It's just that's not a big enough thing to look forward to and be yeah, I want to go to school today. So
when I don't want to come to school and then I get to school, he's the reason. I want to go to his class the most.
He never really lets anyone sit around. You're always given another assignment, and it keeps me focused. And
I don't know, it's just really easy to engage in his class, and he's a really good teacher. I didn't understand math until I came to his class.
Maybe why would students not want to talk to their teachers about what they're struggling? There might not be right.
Some people probably don't want to own up to it.
Yeah.
Most of the time,
embarrassment.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And sometimes there's a lot of loud kids who are popular kind of, and they don't want to be embarrassed by struggling with their grades.
Yes.
Yeah, because
they're very strict about grades. Yeah.
You need to have good grades to play.
Yeah. And even if you had good grades but you got in trouble or written up, then you couldn't play in the game, and that was definitely stressful and kept me in line.
Coming into BFA?
No.
Okay. Good answer. What was the jump?
I feel middle school is very laid back.
I guess having more of a college prep program, I feel as though there isn't a lot of information around how to apply for colleges, especially with early decision and early action deadlines instead of regular decision deadline.
So that was again just a little bit, and what I wanted to point out was when they were talking about the 2 teachers that were very well liked and really felt supported. Both of those teachers do not have phones in their classrooms, and I remember thinking I was going to put that in, but then I was no, I don't do that. They don't have phones in their class. Just I thought that was interesting.
They don't have what?
They don't allow phones in their classrooms. It's up to the teacher's discretion to take the cell phones. We do have a no phone policy. You can have it during passing time for 5 minutes at BFA, which is those 5 minutes. But of course, you can control that if they do have them. But those teachers' phones in a bucket, basket, I don't really know. Because that's what those girls said. Calculator holders are pretty popular. But just kind of highlighting some of those key points, and a lot of what we see is very, very obtainable. And I think what's great about this group and stuff, why we're showing you guys this is that we're getting this feedback, and it's like really exciting for us to either be able to impact that, maybe talking about, okay, we're gonna do some college prep programs. We've been talking to this board at least how we're going into middle schools, and we're telling high school or them this is the transition to high school to help those girls that were saying, you know, I didn't really feel prepared. Now we get to do that, and I think it's such a great thing, and it's like why I love being on this board. And, I think that we see that even though there might be some miscommunications, maybe with like weighted grades and stuff, that's an opportunity of us to be able to share that information and say this is why, or this is how we can fix it. So that was rigorous academics.
So next up is support services for students and families. The goal statement is all students at each school have access to supports, individualized learning opportunities, and flexible pathways. Some of the service level questions that we asked and then we dove deeper in each interview was like, what services are you aware of? What do you feel like they're not in the school that you need? What's going well in Maple Run? What could we be doing better? Those sort of questions. Then the next.
Oh man. So during the COVID years, we got like 0 assignments. I would pop into a Zoom meeting on a Wednesday, and that would be my work for the week. Because of that profound lack of work, I have like no work ethic now. My 7th grade year basically didn't exist because of COVID. In my 8th grade year, I got like an assignment a week. That's nowhere near like high school rigor. And high school rigor also has been lacking.
How do you feel midterms went for you? Like, be as honest as you want.
Midterms, some teachers let us have papers that we could use as kind of a study guide, but also if you didn't prepare yourself, then midterms were definitely hard. And if you were to take a tutoring class or just anything that could help you, I feel like it could make your midterms really easy. Yeah, definitely, because some people just got really overwhelmed with the test, or they got distracted, maybe studying in enrichment, their friends distracted them. And having a study sheet, it was very helpful, but also I feel like it kind of wasn't, because if you want to prepare yourself for college, you won't have a study guide.
I'm aware of like they have the PLP to like basically like improve your college resume.
Many extracurricular activities and team sports, and I feel like those are definitely ways to meet new friends with the people that have the same interests as you. Well, here at Maple Run, we have a lot of services, such as the Northwestern Technical Center. NCTC is definitely a great way for students to prepare for college.
I guess more like stuff for mental health and for people that need stuff like that would be really important to have in the school. It can take a while to be able to get into your guidance counselor because they are dealing with such a wide range of students. So maybe if we had like 1 or 2 more guidance counselors and be able to break up into smaller groups, you could have better access to them. I think one thing that's going well is I feel like we are trying to make more opportunities for students, communication between like the school itself and the student body.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you can see, I've been a professional editor. From my elementary days when you would make like little videos, that's where I got all my knowledge from. But on the next slide, if you would. Thank you. So some of the key concepts that we got out of that, to point out like the phone thing again, that was like the question below you couldn't really see, but the inconsistency of midterms. And so one of the consistent times you had was enrichment. And if someone was on their phone, you were distracted by it, or you were distracted by someone, like what Riley was talking about, that was sort of one of the times where you were able to study, but sometimes you weren't always able to study. But students feel that they have been left behind and are experiencing a slow return back from the COVID-19 pandemic. Students feel that mental health resources and personnel should have a larger presence in our schools. Students see the value in clubs, sports, and co-extracurricular activities as they help students build connections and feel further supported. Students appreciate and understand the purpose of midterms and finals week. However, they feel that more supports could have been offered or communicated to students, and they do appreciate the tutoring and the homework club and stuff like that. And students are generally happy with the move-up day transition days that we offer in Maple Run. And I think that is a really great example of a support that has bounced back really well from COVID, and if anything, it's expanded at like the high school level, bringing kids in with the step-up days and move-up days. And that is a great example of something that we can do and showing that we can bounce back from COVID and we can keep moving and do even better things just because we were set back for a couple of years.
All right, Cooper and I worked on this together because out of these two board goals, the two being consistent policies to address bias and behavior issues and community education and action on inclusion, there is a very large overlap. I did some interviews, which you'll be seeing on the next slide, but the general description of the board goal is that Maple Run procedures on harassment and discipline are consistently applied, well ensuring support and respecting victims and all involved. Some of the questions that we asked largely focused on student behavior, how behavior has changed after COVID, how students have experienced hazing, harassment, and bullying, if they feel safe talking to people at the school and reporting issues, how they can personally feel safe at school, how BFA can be safer and more accepting, and then how repercussions for actions are given out by different teachers, and then what they wish for future students in regard to the board goals.
The goal that Amelia just read off, that is for consistent policies to address bias and behavior issues, community education and action on inclusion. The goal is listed in a following slide, which is right here. So Amelia read the consistent policies to address bias and behavior issues, but the community education and action on inclusion goal is all students have meaningful, equitable, structured, and consistent education that embeds skill building regarding diversity, inclusion, and equity. And then this is Amelia's beautifully crafted video.
I know there's a lot of students of just certain backgrounds, of certain gender identities, who don't feel safe at this school. And I think we need to work harder just to create a safe space socially, physically, and academically.
Since COVID, a lot of students are not receiving the support that they definitely should, and it's been harder to get that support to students. So I feel like student behavior has gotten definitely worse since then.
I think I'm lucky enough to be able to feel comfortable with the teachers around me, where if there is an issue, I can report it, whether it's with another student, whether it's with my grades, or with just outside of school. I think there's a lot of students who don't feel that way. And I think it's important that we as the staff and we as students kind of make an effort to make sure everybody can feel comfortable talking about any issues they have.
In past years, the administration really hasn't. They've been well known for oh, go and report, we're bullying you, go and report it to administration. They won't do anything because in previous years they haven't. I feel like in this year they're doing a bit better with cracking down on some of that. If a kid was skipping a class to go vape in the bathroom or something, versus a kid was skipping a class because they were having an anxiety attack or something, I feel like there should be understanding, particularly with charities. It's there's a million reasons that someone could be late to school.
I think depending on the severity of it, it's important to give warnings, but it's also important to give immediate action or immediate punishment to students who did something dangerous that could harm others or can just harm somebody's feelings overall.
There's a lot of ways I think BFA could improve on that. I mean, it's hard because I know with the way the like building is set up, it's not really built to support it, but I feel like, and I'm not sure if it's 100% a possibility, but I think that BFA could definitely benefit from more like gender neutral bathrooms. I know every time I have to go into a bathroom, I am so anxious because I'm trans and I identify as a guy. I'm very like masculine presenting, but my voice is very like feminine and high pitched a lot of the time. So it's like, what bathroom do I use? Like most of the time I'll use the women's bathroom because I'm like, or I'm less likely to be harassed in there, but it's like, I feel like then I'm gonna make everyone in there uncomfortable as well. There is a few gender neutral bathrooms, but they are very spread out throughout the school and they're very like inaccessible to like if you're trying to like quickly use the bathroom during like passing time or something. Ooh, like do I even feel like any safer in the women's restroom even anymore, because it's like, especially after the story of Next Benedict came out, that's like, ooh, it's like I'm really not safe no matter where I go.
It's hard to do something, I guess, big. Like you can't tell every single one of these students over like the intercom or something to help people be more safe, you know what I mean? I think it's gonna come from teacher to student in the classes. I think it's just the little messages. Like the little messages are gonna help a lot more than just a big group message, because it's when you're just saying something to someone, it doesn't mean anything. But when you're kind of like not engraving it, but you're teaching them the lessons that kind of come with telling them that, it's gonna help a lot more than just telling somebody to do something. You need to show them what they can do.
There's a clap for all of them.
Okay. That's usually at the end, but that's okay. We have one more.
This is gonna make it over.
So some of the key concepts that were taken away in regards to consistent policies to address bias and behavior issues is that COVID has undoubtedly impacted student behavior, and that at least in the past year, administration and staff have improved upon issues addressing hazing, harassment, and bullying. One of the students that was interviewed for this, you said in one of the clips that the new administration has definitely improved, but that there is still a dissatisfaction over mental health being roped into the same category as skipping regarding attendance, because there are certain instances where a student just can't go into the classroom because of the mental state that they're in, and then punishing them for that just makes the situation worse.
Yeah, and for community education and action on inclusion, students feel like as a community, students and staff together, they could work to make it a more physically safe, socially safe, and academic safe environment. One of the responses we got was that there's a lack of gender neutral bathrooms available at BFA. Then students need to be taught about differences and acceptances, not just be told, so kind of like embed that into the curriculum in some way. A few more. All right. So this is opportunities for family and community engagement. The goal is all community members will have the opportunity to engage safely with the school and district through two-way communication and feel welcome in our system. And with this goal, we found it really difficult to get like an adequate student response on it, because this goal is definitely, I'd say, more oriented towards like the parents and community members. And so the information that is going to be cited in the next slide is feedback we gathered at events such as the BFA Experience event and the BFA Theater Musical this year, which was Mamma Mia. And below the little picture there is the form that we handed out. And it just kind of goes over like what are some things that we've done good as a district, what are some things that we can do better as a district, and kind of like what is your vision for the district. And so the next slide is just a few of the responses. We got a lot of responses, and so these were, I would say, like the bulk of the feedback that we got. So parents are concerned about students not attending 504 meetings at school. Parents would like to see more communication between teachers and parents when students are falling behind or not demonstrating proficiency. Parents would like to see more school-hosted events such as BFA Fine Arts Night, and parents would like to have more opportunities to get involved in school events.
What's a 504?
Yeah, so for kids that have 504 plans at school, I believe it's through like special education. It's for like people that Casey, I think you
Need an accommodation. Need accommodation.
Yeah, it's
Right,
for like
but
people that have, like,
not at the
Right,
IEP
not
level.
special education, it's actually medical.
yeah, it's like ADHD, I believe, like sometimes autism, just different.
So they don't?
So this concern was about like a student skipping that meeting that they're supposed to be having with the school.
Like just not showing up to that meeting, because they have coordinators for it, and you're supposed to meet with them and see what you need, but some of the students don't come. So that's
Thank you.
That's our last slide. If we have any questions, comments, I just think, I'll comment on my time, but I just think it's so great how much we can see, and I hope we do this for the, I say we, I hope you all continue to do this, because I see such value in it, and I also see like how many kids want to talk and like articulate such amazing views that we don't even think about. And I'm sorry, I didn't even watch all of Nathaniel's video, but such an insight. These students have such insight, and when given the opportunity, I think it'll go really far.
I second that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now we call.
Thank you. That's great.
Did we have any questions, or?
Oh, you got homework tonight, Colby?
No, I need to hop onto a Zoom meeting, actually talk about school safety.
Just kidding.
Yeah, he's actually going to go on
Yeah.
out there, so he asked me already. I have to jump into a Zoom meeting.
He's going to get paid.
Yeah, I get to be a facilitator.
Nilda, I appreciate the opportunity to stay for that. Thank you. But it really didn't answer my question.
There's another one. It's an extra report.
So there's another.
Excellent.
I'd like to leave this with you so I don't
The
forget.
next presentation is a student data presentation, which might be more what you're looking for.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's just move on to that, John, if we go to the student data presentation.
Can you hear me, Nilda?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So it's always hard to follow the students, which I say every time, and maybe one of these times I can go first. So what we've been doing for 2 years now is collecting specific pieces of student learning data and data related to the student experience that's outlined in our school plans and the objectives and key results. And so that's the dashboard that I have to present today. We typically do this 3 times a year. At the very start of the school year, we review the end of the year data from the previous year. We then, a little bit further into the fall, review the fall data, and then the January, February timeframe, we review our mid-year data collection. So those are the 3 kind of checkpoints that we have. We don't normally do a report at the end of June, but there's been lots of questions lately about new implementations of programs and new practices in schools and a desire for this data while it's hot off the presses. And also we have a lot of things that we want to highlight and celebrate, and so it felt right to do this initial presentation now and then do the normal update as we get into the late summer and school starts, when we can bring teachers and instructional coaches in to do those presentations to the board and the community. I will also say Alexis Hoyt, who is our Director of Student Supports and usually presents all the social emotional learning pieces, isn't here. So I have captured those key pieces of that data, and you can look forward to something more in depth from her at the end of the summer. We have a whole list of acronyms that show up time and time again, and so this is attached to the slides as a reference if anybody wants to go back and look at it at any point. And there are a couple key pieces to reference. So when we started this planning process 2 school years ago, we were really not in a great place. We had only 44% of students meeting our attendance criteria as we were coming out of the COVID years. Excuse me. And the data from those 2 years that were most heavily impacted by COVID related to attendance was significantly worse. So 44% actually represented a lot of growth, but obviously is far off of where we want to be and need to be. We had different systems and practices related to collecting data about behavior across the district. And we had a high number of students who were substantially below grade level in math and literacy. And particularly in our early grade levels, this was a crisis level. As we've talked about before at board meetings, we had grade levels where single-digit percentage of students were reading or able to do math on grade level coming out of those 2 COVID years. And all of the research really speaks to the importance of those early elementary grade levels and the foundational knowledge students gain there to be able to progress through school successfully. And so we presented before, and I don't want to rehash the whole things, but it really has been 2 years of an all-out effort in these areas. And we did have a huge strength to draw upon going into this. When we compare our data to nationally normed data, what our students report about well-being, school safety, and sense of belonging were and continue to be relative strengths, and I can give you some more insight into that. And so we have now, 2 years into this, we've seen some pretty dramatic changes across all of these different contexts, and so you'll get a snapshot of where we are now, as well as some reference data about where we've been over the past 2 years. These are here more for reference. These have been in several board meetings lately, but this process that we use is the OKRs, the objectives, key results, and success measures. We did have two objectives, one related to a school culture of high expectations, and one related to the guaranteed and viable curriculum. And then each of those had 5 key results or key areas of action for us across the district. These were the identified success measures, and it's hard to see up there, I'm sorry. We had success measures related to the evaluation of professional development, attendance, students on track for behavior, literacy, math, our social emotional learning surveys, and then some more concrete pieces of data in terms of schedules that met the minimum number of instructional minutes and time and schedules for teams to collaborate across the district. It's important to note when we look at any of this data, there's been lots of change, and so there's a few things to know. We're using local data for this. I presented to the board earlier this week about the data that we get from the state really being anywhere from 2 to 3 years out of date, which makes it hard for us to use for actionable purposes. So the data that we use is all taken from evidence and research-based universal screeners and diagnostics. And the data from today, or for today, focuses really heavily on those universal screeners. So these are tools designed to measure the health of the system overall and to look at large groups, not to get into the weeds of individual student behavior to make comparisons between individual students. We do have tools to do that, but they're, because of their specificity, not great at helping us measure the health of the system. So this is a case of trying to choose the right tool for the right purpose. And the other piece that really I'll emphasize, because it represents a big success that I'll articulate later, is our academic assessments are progressive assessments. So that means if we started the year and 50% of our students were on track and reading at grade level, and every student learned about a year's worth of material in a year, that would mean we'd be on track to end the year with 50% of students reading on grade level, right? Because the difficulty of the test and what it assesses changes over time to match what students are supposed to be learning as they progress through the school year. A static assessment you would expect to see students who learned, you'd expect to see those percentages change from 50% to a much higher number if students learned a year's worth of material and the assessment didn't change. So we utilize progressive assessments because they help us measure where kids are now against where they should be now in learning progressions. So 6th grade, the beginning of the year, looks different than the middle of 6th grade, looks different than the end of 6th grade. The reason I explain that in detail is because we have some pretty incredible gains which show that our students are actually learning much more than a year's worth of material in the school year, which is something we really want to celebrate as we mobilize to respond to the data that we have and push back from these lows we have post-COVID. And then lastly, this is where the data is coming from. So attendance is attendance data that is entered by the schools in PowerSchool. Behavior referrals and Panorama represent the data source for our behavior metric. In literacy, we're using a DIBELS-based assessment, K-5, which is that gold standard assessment for early literacy. And then we use IXL in 6 to 12 as a reading comprehension screener. Math, K-8 is iReady, and 9 to 12 is IXL. And then for the SEL score, there's a significant body of research that speaks to student connection to adults at school being a predictor of their overall well-being at school. And so previously the question in the survey was, how connected do you feel to the adults at your school? That question actually changed going into this school year by our survey provider, Panorama, to make it more rigorous. And it now reads, do you have a teacher or other adult at school who you can count on to help you no matter what? So that represented a shift in rigor, or a harder to obtain, or a question that is harder to obtain a positive response from. So that said, here's where we are for our dashboard. So you can see we have fall, winter, and spring data results. If you're tracking from the top to the bottom, left to right. In attendance, our goal was to have 70% of the student body on track to meet our benchmark, which is 9 or fewer absences. We started the year with 60% of students on track. In the winter, we had a slump that we came and reported about. We had 49% of students on track, and we represented some significant concerns that had raised for us. And then we have ended the year with 50% of students meeting the attendance benchmark. So that represents a significant decline of 10 points from the start of the year. It's 20 points under where we wanted to be at the end of the year, but it does represent an increase from last year where we ended the year at 44%. For behavior, where the target is 85% of students on track. On track means 4 or fewer major incidents for the course of the year. In the fall, our data had 78% of students on track. In the winter, it was 77, and then in the spring, it was 79, so relatively consistent across the year. So we're up 1 point from the start of the year, but still short of our benchmark, although this does represent growth over last year of 6 points. In literacy, you'll see literacy and math, we have scores reported out by different grade levels because of the different assessments. So starting with K to 5, we started the year with 31% of students reading on grade level. We were up to 38% this winter and ended the year at 43%, which is an increase of 12 points. We have 6 to 12, 17% of students at the start of the year, ending the year with 31% reading on grade level. So that's an increase of about 14 points. I will say, with both the literacy and the math data, this places us squarely in line with national averages right now, which is not something to be proud of. We want to be better than that. But in terms of placing this in context, this is about average, depending on the grade level. We're either slightly below or slightly above what we're seeing for averages nationwide when we look at norms data. In math, you can see we started the year at 13%, K to 8, and we have increased by 28 points to 41 by the end of the year. And then at the high school level, we started with 3% and ended the year with 5%. Social emotional learning continues to be a strength for us. So you may remember that the difficulty of that question increased increased for us a little bit. We ended the year last year with 78% of students responding favorably and started this year with 80%. And we've actually defied the national norms related to this, which is that as the year goes on, the percentage of students responding favorably declines. And we had a small increase of 3 points. This actually puts us in the 91st percentile nationwide with regards to these social emotional learning metrics. The social emotional learning metrics. So that's a lot of data. It is important to note we've also been working with you all as a board about how you want to receive data about how individual schools and student populations are doing. And so we have been presenting the data. This is an example from the fall, where we look at where the data is for us as a district in that middle column, and then we look where we have statistically significant differences to the positive or the negative across the district. And so this has been a really powerful exercise for us that helps us identify the differences that matter, but also doesn't overwhelm anybody with looking at a spreadsheet that couldn't possibly even fit on a huge poster board. And so you can see here, in the fall we had some significant differences both to the positive and the negative. And then in the winter we dropped a few of those as we collected more data. And then I'm happy to say that by the end of this year, actually, all of the schools were either performing in line with the district numbers or exceeding them. And so you'll see that as of right now, Fairfield is the only school that has a statistically significant difference to the positive in any of those metrics.
I just want to add in, John and I were talking earlier, this is a huge growth for the district. We had, as you all know and remember from the other reports, we had quite a scattering amongst our schools, especially across our pre-Ks. And I'm going to single out one of our schools, which is City School, that just really brought themselves up into the norm. So, Stacy, you should do that.
We're going to get a thumbs up.
Because it's just really amazing. City gets a tough reputation, which isn't deserved. I mean, they are performing as well as the rest of the district. So,
I will just echo Bill's sentiments, and I will say also, I didn't include this slide here because Bill told me that it would take too much time, so I'm just going to reference it.
We'll do more in September.
We will do more in September, but it is important to note that up until this school year, we had 15 to 16 years of declining literacy and math scores in this district. And so this is actually the first year that last spring was the first time that we broke that trend and stopped the year-over-year decline. And this is actually the first year in that time period that we've shown positive growth. And we've actually shown, by education data standards, incredible growth. And in all of these important metrics, and at the same time, we've closed the achievement gaps between all of the campuses, which is pretty significant. And then I will also show you, because we've looked at subgroup data as well. So you can see at the start of the year, these are the different groups that had statistically significant performances to the positive and the negative, mostly to the negative with one exception. In the winter, it was essentially all the same groups, and we lost the one group with the positive difference there. And by the end of the year, this is where we're seeing the differences that are significant. So one to the positive with behavior, and then in literacy and math, ELL students, so English language learners, and free and reduced lunch eligible students. So those would be our students that meet those low income designations, which we've seen an incredible increase in students who meet that criteria.
John.
Oh, sorry. I was just wondering if I could kind of make a comment about BFA's math. So, I know, we all look at it, we're like, oh my God, 3%. But I mean, it did jump to 5, which I would actually say is a big jump. But, so, the little bit of a difference that they did this year, the BFA math department, is we saw that 3% in the fall, And then in the winter, it was announced that if you perform well on your final, or excuse me, if you perform to your grade level at the end of the year, you won't have to do, with IXL, you won't have to do the final. And so that's why we see that jump in the winter, because once you start to do better on your IXL, so if you do better in the winter, it's easier to do better at the end of the year. And so that kind of incentive, I would really say, in addition to we do have a fabulous math department down at DFA, I would say definitely was responsible for that jump.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I think all that information that I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you, because I think all that information that you just put on there is really important. I think that, you know, for folks like Dan who are coming in here one night, right, to look at this information, I think that looking at trend data is way more helpful for somebody who is just kind of stepping in, looking at the information, than, you know, having to go back and, you know, go back to cross-reference numbers. So I just think it's huge. Because we wouldn't have known that unless you made a reference to it tonight.
I will say, in terms of, we've tried to present data that is accurate and reliable and valid. Probably one of the challenges we have, actually going back with our historical data, was the use of assessments that weren't reliable and valid. And so it's really hard to make those comparisons. And it's further complicated. The state has several times changed the state assessment, which makes it hard to use that as a baseline as well. So it's
not reliable.
But if I'm hearing you correctly, you could start now and create the baseline, and then moving forward have it. So my only real question, and it was definitely worthwhile to stay here, I'm alarmed, quite frankly, at the numbers, as I'm sure everyone is. How is this communicated with parents and taxpayers, and the people who are, you know, our tax bills don't go down, and a huge chunk of that is for education. I'm not voting down school budgets. I'm a big fan of education, but how is this to be communicated so that people understand you're making progress?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the board meetings. We went over last year's data a couple of months ago, and so that's kind of where we saw that the fall of 2023, then we saw the winter of 2024, and so really I'd say if more people attended the board meetings and gave insight like you do, which I appreciate.
Yeah, it's great to have
stuff like that.
guys involved in the school.
How would what do you think would be the most effective way to communicate?
What?
How would you like it to be communicated to you?
That's a great question. I think town meeting, a report from the principals in your town would be, we used to do that. And we used to have the principal come in and say, here's where we are in terms of our functional literacy. And whether you pick just the reading, writing, and math, or you want to throw something else in there, that would be a great time to do that. And here's where we were last year. Here's the mitigating factors, whatever they may be. That would be a good way to do it. Accessible somewhere online would be great. I'm not a huge fan of digging through online. I'm not a digital native. I'm obviously a little older. But having it, I looked for something like that today, and I couldn't find anything that had where you were last year or the year before. And so that would be helpful to be able to go, oh, okay, there is a trend, and it is up or down or whatever. So, did I answer your question?
Okay.
Well, Nilda, I just have one last piece. So we haven't done the full round of data analysis because we get this data at the very end of the school year, and so the leadership team still has some work to do. But in terms of the initial reactions from the team, we're very excited about this progress in literacy and math, and I can tell you that I use the word unprecedented. It might not, like, we're still coming from behind. We're not happy with where we are, but the growth is really incredible. And then the elimination of significant differences differences between schools and subgroups is really something to celebrate and really shows the power of the district working together. But I will say we are extremely concerned about our inability to turn the tide on attendance, because attendance is actually the primary predictor of academic success. And so having data that is as sobering as ours is concerning to us.
So,
Thank you, John.
if I'm correct, if I could just ask one more question. 1 in 20 of your high school students are functioning in math at grade level. 5%.
And we're gonna keep,
Wow.
we keep moving them to the next level, and they're not there. I mean, how is that? I mean,
I'm at an
an
8th grade math level.
I was at a 7th grade and I've passed all of my math courses with either an A or an A plus. It ties in, the way that this diagnostic is created, is it ties in early math. So it ties in stuff that you were learning in 4th and 5th grade. And once you get a question wrong, it bumps you down a level. So I could be doing great for the beginning of the test, but once I get maybe one math question on my level wrong, it bumps me down grade levels. And this is it's a lot of like equation-based stuff. So like like calculations for the circumference of a cylinder. And so stuff like this. It's not necessarily like a way you can apply the skills you're learning at BFA, but it's just stuff that you learned years and years ago. And so once you get one wrong, it bumps you down more and more. And we've really forgot kind of like that type of early on math. And so it kind of like the way it's
The
created.
basic, like, foundational learning, I will admit it's not there for me personally.
So-
I can't do fractions.
I can give you a quick take on that, and I think that it's actually something that maybe we might want to explore in more detail with some of the math department and with some of the math administrators or the high school administrators. But what we do actually see in middle school and in high school, so not just at high school, but the procedural fluency plays a large part in how all of these rigorous assessments work. And as students get into higher level and higher level math, there has been, I don't even know how long, at least a 20-year long move to not emphasize that procedural fluency and to focus on the conceptual attainment of those higher level math skills. And so with these new really rigorous math assessments, you do see students' math levels bumped down even if they're answering high-level math questions correctly, if they're not showing that they're proficient in all of the skills the standards say a student at that grade level should know.
Right. Or maybe they look at a problem. I just translate what you're saying, John. They look at a problem and they can do the math, but they may not understand what the question's asking them.
Totally.
No, that's not what John's saying. It's the other way around.
That's what the kids are saying. But that's what the kids are saying.
They're saying they can't do the functioning
Yeah.
of the arithmetic.
They might be able to do the different parts of it, but they may not understand the procedure, what order to do, which pieces sometimes, or sometimes not understanding the vocabulary of what they're asking them to do from English to math. Cooper?
Yeah, and I would also say it's also sometimes not necessarily that like you don't understand how to do it, but it's also the form that in the way they would like it answered. So you may have done the problem perfectly, but they wanted 2 decimal places, not 1. Too bad. Sorry, you got the question wrong. We're bumping you down a level. So it's also parts like that, or if they want a decimal and a fraction form. So even if you are doing fantastic at that level, it's bringing you down the level, and so it's bringing into knowledge that you haven't explored in 5 years.
So I will say that's also accurate. I was saying something different than that, but that is also accurate and is reflective of the way students have to be assessed in math, whether it's SAT, ACT, the state exam, or college assessment practices. Those mistakes will also have a performance penalty in those forms as well. So what we've been trying to do, and we could revisit it because I think we've had some new board members as well. We could revisit some of the presentations we did 2 years ago. We've tried to match the assessments that we're using with the actual state and national norms for assessments, so that students don't do really well on our local assessment and then don't do well on the state assessment or don't do well on something like in high school in the ACT or SAT. And what we're finding actually is the assessments that we've shifted to are highly correlated with the results we get from the Vermont State Assessment, from ACT, from SAT, and other kind of validity checks that we can utilize.
I just kind of want to.
Okay, I think we're about time to move on from this topic here.
Oh,
Somebody have another
Amelia had her hand
question?
raised. Amelia had her hand
Yeah.
raised. She had one more comment to make. I just wanted to build off of what Cooper said a little bit. Some of the stuff that is on IXL, they have you do little activities that they're usually geometry related. They require you to use an interface that I ran into for the first time when we were doing IXL this year, and I just didn't know how to use it, so I got the question wrong, and then it like bumped me down to a 5th grade geometry level. And that's just another thing about like, if you don't understand the language, but also if you don't understand the actual interface, you get the question wrong and then it just bumps you down.
Great, thank you. Thank you, John, for your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. I appreciate it a lot. And we're going to now move on to the next agenda item. And that is old business. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. It's great to see the high school students here, and that was really nice. Wow, I got a lot to think about. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate what all of you board members are doing. I don't think you hear that enough, that the community service is a really valuable thing. And so thanks for that, ladies.
Thank you. Okay, old business, 7A, plan for meeting board goals. So we had kind of tabled this from, or skipped it, I guess, from last meeting because we were so busy, but there is a form in your packet, and it was in your packet last meeting. Also, it's called a student observation form. And if you recall, there is a goal that states, this is one of our board of director goals, that states that we monitor activities to intentionally include data and evidence as well as voices and perspectives of multiple stakeholders. So this form that's in your packet is an opportunity for you as individuals to monitor data for events that you go to. So if you were to go to an art exhibit, or if you were to go to a band concert, or if you were going to go to a, I don't know, spelling bee, whatever's going on, and you can monitor using the form aspects of how it went. And what we'd like to do is have people attend a lot of different things and fill out those forms and come back. And then we'd like to have a section at our board meeting at the end of it where we talk about, board announcements and stuff, and we have our board members sort of report out what they observed, and then we have evidence, our own evidence of direct observation of certain aspects of some of the school stuff. So if that makes sense, I hope it does. If it doesn't, do you have any questions? I'm not hearing any.
No.
I think
okay.
No, all I would add is we kind of talked about this last time. Charlie gave an example of being at a concert.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, yeah. And then the next item is 7B, board discussions at meetings. How do we support more board member voices in discussions at meetings? So this is generated from me. So when we had that retreat, and I asked you all how it went, and everybody was pretty quiet, and then after a bit, nobody was quiet, and everybody told me exactly what they saw in the retreat. I would like to have that same level of discussion on other things that we talk about, as long as we're not, breaking up rules of talking about a teacher, talking about a student, or talking about anyone that is maligning them in any way, or breaking any FERPA rules. So this is really, I'm kind of putting this out more as like a thought trigger for you guys, are there certain things that we can talk about? And what we have to remember, these are set things that we have to talk about in open session. So oftentimes we have certain things that are protected by the Vermont open meeting law, and we talk about them in executive session. But these are things that, you know, I'd like to see us be able to talk about in open session. So basically what I'm asking you guys to do is to put on your thinking caps and see how you could see this working better. Because as much as I did like to hear what I heard about the retreat, you guys are very open and honest, and that's the kind of discussion we need to be a good functioning board. So we can have some discussion now about it if you'd like, or we could spend some time, you know, whatever the right word is, cogitating on it and talk about it at our next meeting. Any comments?
I do.
Thank you.
So,
yes.
A lot of times we'll talk about something here at the meeting and I'll tend to go home and think about it and think about it and think about it. And then a couple days later, I'll be like, well, I wish I would have asked that question. What if we had time at the next board meeting to kind of just have a small section? Does anybody have anything from last time that they want to bring up? Because sometimes it just, my question or my thought just is gone because it's not on the agenda. Does that make sense?
That's not a bad idea at all. The other thing, I think if you notice a little later, there's a section for board information requests too, because on the same token, sometimes you guys hear stuff at the meeting and it prompts you to think about stuff, and you think, gee, I wonder how many X's there were. And, and then if there's 10 of you that are doing that, Bill and the administrators are getting that many phone calls requesting data. So we need a better process for that, because nobody's trying to hide data. I mean, the data is public information, but we also are not trying to make our administrators jump through 10 hoops to be able to answer everything. So we need a more defined process. And we looked, and there's no policy that defines that process right now. And I know when Bill gets a request, he does his best to answer it, if he knows the answer off the top of his head. If there's some research involved, then it becomes a little bit bigger an issue, and sometimes he has to assign it to a staff member to go digging for it, and it gets a little more complicated. So I like your idea, Susie, about having some opportunity to talk about anything that came up at the last meeting. I mean, we'll have to use a little bit of judicious, whatever it is, to make sure we don't break any open meeting rules, but we could try that at the next meeting. I'd be happy to try that. Bill, do you see any reasons why that we can't do that?
No, I've seen boards have reflection, what they call a reflection agenda on the
Right.
agenda. And
Yeah.
what have you thought about
Yeah,
this?
we just have to have guardrails so that we don't, do anything. Reflections is a good term too. Reflections on last meeting or something like that. So I know Aaron's writing this down. So anyway, for all of you, I think does that idea sound like a good idea?
Hi, just like Bill just said, reflections, but sometimes at the end of our meetings, we have like board announcements, and maybe we could just have it be reflections and announcements.
That's an idea too. Now, if you notice tonight, the gentleman that was here, I deviated from our normal process, right? And he engaged in conversation with us. And I made that decision because he was the only person here and obviously was interested. But normally we don't do what we did, right? We don't have that back and forth stuff that happens with people that come. So that was kind of interesting for me tonight because it actually worked out very well.
Yes.
And I think, he got some of what he wanted, and I think he left the place, the boardroom, with a positive impression on what things are. So, this is all kind of I don't know, it's like a game of chess or something, trying to figure out what's the right thing to do to make sure that we share the information that's pertinent to people, that they can use, that helps us sell our school as a positive place, and doesn't, get us into this whole free-fall conversation about stuff that may not be on topic. So I'm basically just throwing these kind of thoughts out to you guys, to see if we can kind of get some sort of organized process. I like the reflections part, so we can either put it with the announcements, as you suggested, Joanna, or give it a separate header, whatever, and see how it goes, and see where it goes from there.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And then the next item is related to the district mission and visions. So we talked a few meetings ago about the fact that our mission, which is on the wall in there, and our vision, which I don't think is on the wall in there, and the fact that it maybe needs to be revised to reflect more what really is happening. And Bill has suggested this process where you look at your goals and you figure out, you know, the nouns and the verbs, and you make a list of your goal and the nouns that are in that goal and the verbs that are in that goal, and then you can figure out a way to craft a mission statement, you know, the nouns being what you want to do and the verbs being how you want to do them, I think is how it goes. And that, you know, I actually did it because I'm a geek, and it was kind of fun to do, but I think it would not be a bad idea for us to have either a subcommittee or the whole board to do this work, because I think we could crank out a mission and vision pretty simply. And I think it would get the key points that we wanted to have, because we would be using our own words, right? Our own goals and our own stuff. So Joanna's laughing, you know, smiling here because she's pleased as punch that this isn't happening. So I would like to suggest either we have a subcommittee or we do the work at this summer over a couple meetings and approve it in the fall or something like that. Does anyone have any feedback on that?
Can I just give a little bit of what you and I talked about?
Sure.
Okay. So I think either it's a subcommittee or work of the board. I actually prefer the work of the board, that you have one meeting in July, so you could come together and actually announce to the community we're having a forum, just like this gentleman did tonight, and say, please come, we're going to do this activity. And Nilda kind of gave some of the activity. And you have a couple of groups working. It depends how many people you have in the room, but you don't want to table more than like 6 to 8 people. And you try to spread people out and say, okay, so we'll give you a process. There's, in the education world and nonprofit world, there's 2 or 3 processes that are pretty much set on how you develop a mission and vision once you have your goals and your feedback from the community, which we already have. And then you sit there and you try to craft one, and then you let it sit. And your next meeting's the 3rd Wednesday in August, and you come back and look at those, and you announce to the public, we're gonna look at those again. You kind of craft those and say, is there one we really like from those small groups? And you have some time to think about it, reflect on it. And then say, okay, we have one, we want to go out to feedback. And you could probably do that easily electronically, not that you have to go all the way and have all these formal meetings, but say, please, there's ways to do that online. And then have that come back, and you could somewhere in September have a mission and vision aligned to all the goal work and feedback that we've gotten from the community.
Do you think we would get more community attendance if we waited until September when we were back in school? Or do you think we would get enough people in July to come to a board meeting?
I don't think it would be that difference with what we've seen. I think.
Sorry
not to be
optimistic every time. Get 100 chairs.
Right. and that's just the part, you know, one of the things I said to Nilda was, I don't think we need a lot of public engagement.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that informs a strategic plan, and there's been so much opportunity. If you look at the goals and doing this from the goals, that had tons of community input.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the community input. I don't think you need a huge community group to do the writing.
Cool.
I think you want feedback and open from everyone. Did we get it right?
Mm-hmm.
And did we hear what you had to say? And that can happen in September. But even that big of a committee, writing as a committee is painful enough. So really getting open can get really painful, is my experience. Because you usually have to have 1 or 2 people who are actually crafting it.
Mm-hmm.
But if we had a couple of groups, I can think if we had this in the room and we asked any leadership team members, they'd be some of the first people I'd ask to come as well, and say, okay, roll up your sleeves, and it's about a half-hour activity. And then what do we have? And then you bring back what the different groups did, and you put it on a list, you look at that in August and say, is there one we like, or we want a couple of these combined? Carly, we're tasking you with combining them.
come up, and then we're gonna start in September, we're gonna ask for feedback electronically, you know, and I'm just using it because you're the one I'm talking with. But, you know, it's somebody that does that work, brings that back, and then we ask for electronic input and comments and things like that.
Great.
If we didn't
That's
have
great.
all that community input, then yes, we want all that community input.
Thanks for filling in the blanks for me.
That's okay.
So, do you guys like the idea of trying to do it this summer and then, as Bill's described?
Yes.
I think we're nodding our heads, right?
There were a couple of yeses in here as well.
Anybody feel differently about it? All right.
Okay. All right, thank you. Next item is a legal matter. I'm going to make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss a legal matter, because if we were to do it in public session, it would leave either the board or individuals at risk. Can I have a second?
Second, Joanna.
Thank you. We really can't have a whole lot of discussion because we're just having a finding right now that this fits into executive session. It will be handled at the end of the meeting with the other personnel issue that we have coming up. So, all in favor of the motion, Amanda?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Harley?
Yes.
Neil votes yes. Motion carries unanimously. All right, next item is, we touched upon this a little bit, process for board information request. And do we have a policy? The answer is no, not at this time. So, I guess, how do you folks feel as far as how receptive the administration has been when you've had requests? Do you feel like you've been given stumbling blocks, or do you feel like you've gotten the data you need? You know, sometimes Bill will offer to meet with a board member to help them understand something in more detail if they're, you know, looking for some particular information. I mean, I think the board kind of goes in cycles of asking for information a lot of the time, and then we kind of don't for a while, and then we ask for it for a while. And I guess if we could just come up with a process, or be able to wait so that if there's a request, it makes it to the board meeting, gets on the agenda as a request, and then get processed so that everybody's making the request, not an individual board member, but it's meeting the needs of the whole board. So, you know, the request becomes at the pleasure of the whole board, not at the pleasure of an individual. How does that sound?
So, Nilda, can I just add, because you and I were talking about this, and I asked to put this on the agenda. I can see two sides to this. Like, it's a simple piece of information, I would like to get it, and, you know, just because I'm curious. At the same time, I don't want to be doing any appearance of treating any board member special. And it's not that I don't want to give the information, I'm trying to think about the process. And I can see if I were a board member and said, I want to know what's the total number of staff we have? And like, that should be a simple, quick response. And it seems like it should be. At the same time, it's like, where's that line? And so I asked Nelda, I said, can we have this discussion? Because there's been some simple factual questions I've been asked. And I'm like, I want us to I would feel frustrated if I were a board member, like, I gotta wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks to ask that question. But at the same time, I think we'd like to have that, and I'd like to provide that with you, but I'd like to try to find a place where I'm not making judgments about what has to come to the board for the board to authorize and what doesn't. And I don't know that we'll come to necessarily consensus tonight, but that idea of how do you feel like you're getting the service you need as board members and you have the information you need to be able to make decisions, at the same time that it's everyone on the board's aware of that question and aware of the information. I hope I'm expressing that enough. I'm not, it's just really trying to find that process that works for people. And I think many of you have asked me for information. I've usually said, well, because our default response has been, which is the Vermont School Boards Association's recommendation, That happens in board meetings. And you wait for board meetings and you give it back to the next one. And so, I'm not trying to think of the that there isn't an overwhelming ask for information. Don't hear that. What I'm trying to think about is what's our process so that it's one that is open to everyone on the board and that we figure that out. Like I said, I'm not necessarily need an answer tonight, but I think it's one we need to talk about because I don't want to frustrate any of you by saying, hey, that should be simple information. Why am I waiting for that? And how does the board know about that? So, if that makes any sense, that's just how you're dealing with. This is a dilemma I've been dealing with in my own head.
I guess for me, I feel like there's certain demographic information that we should all be equipped with at the beginning of every year. And I think that would be hugely beneficial for everybody. And that would answer probably 85% of, those types of questions. Demographic information about each of the separate schools and our district as a whole. And instead of us having to, look back at an old report or something like that you just don't have, at your fingertips. Yeah, I'll just stop there. I think there's a difference between asking for demographic information, right, factual information that is public information that everybody should be able to have versus people asking a question that, I don't know, I guess it's just more obscure. And is that the will of the board or is that one person's, personal interest?
Right.
I guess, right?
Right.
So I think that we can determine that pretty easily though, mostly,
We can determine it if we're all together. If Bill gets a random phone call, does he chase down that information or do we wait until it comes to the next meeting?
Okay. I guess if you're looking for some specific information, maybe there should be a chain of command and it should be to either Charlie or Nilda before it goes to Bill. Because number one, maybe Charlie or Nilda can answer that question for the board member and they don't have to go through you. Or Charlie and Nilda would be able to decide if that was, part of our current agenda or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we can hammer this out a little more, Bill, as more requests come through, if they do.
Yeah, no, I can think of, Susie, I'm going to take about one you emailed me about. What's your homeless numbers, I think is what you asked me.
Yeah, I asked how many students were homeless in the district.
Yeah, so it's that, that's something that's in our databases that should be able to queue in a couple minutes, right? And so that's what to me, I don't see any judgment on that. It's just trying to think about how we do that. Is that one that we just go through and say, hey, the chair and the vice chair will filter and for right now and say, yeah, get that back and send it back to all board members. So this is the question, here's the information. Because I wouldn't want any of you to feel like I'm giving Jack information that I'm not giving all of you.
Right.
I'd want all of you to know that this question's been asked, here's the information.
So maybe we could generate a list of things that we feel would be helpful demographic information for us all to have at the beginning of each school year.
Yeah.
And then, that could literally just be in a binder that we all receive.
Yeah.
And then we have it.
Hey, Jack.
So, the way I think of this is that as a board member, I learn from my fellow board members. And so if someone thinks of a question, like the homeless question, that's a good question. I hadn't thought of that recently. But knowing that it was asked and having the answer brought to a board meeting saying, one of you asked this question, that would inform me about that. So I would like the process to be that the whole board gets the answers to those kinds of questions, just as an educational thing for me and for others.
Yeah, like you could tell you, answer the question directly to you and then tell the rest of us whatever.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I was using the example of the homeless that Susie, you asked about a week ago or something like that through email. And that was like the second question from another, well, I had another one from a board member, which I don't remember what it is right now. And I was like, wait a minute. If I wait all the way for Susie to ask that tonight, and we don't meet till the 17th of July, that's really frustrating. It would be to me. That's really frustrating. So how do we get a process that allows those types of things to come in and say, okay, look, we get the information. That's why with what you just said, Jack, it's easy to put in an email. This was the question, here's the information. You know, and I like the idea of trying to use Charlie and Nilda for a quick filter, because there's going to be a place, and I don't know what the question is. I literally don't know what it is, but there's a point where like, oh, wait a minute, that's going to take a little while to produce. Do we want to report, or there's some kind of context that needs to be given around this data that won't just happen in an email that, you know, like John tonight. You know, Joanna just isn't here right now. Oh, she's here to hear this, but you're like, hey, that piece of data that you just said verbally is really helpful. And so that little discussion helps us. So I'd be willing to try to write a little something up, Nilda, for the 17th, and just use you and Charlie, just what we just said. Let's try that, a little filter, you know, to work with the chair and the vice chair, and say, then we can produce those back and not have to wait for a meeting, but just say, here's the data.
Sounds good.
But we're gonna inform, we're gonna say it during the meeting.
Yeah, well, maybe,
Okay,
you know,
so the
that's
public
probably a good
knows.
idea, so the
So
public
that
knows.
public
Yeah.
knows, you know, they might wanna know.
And report at the meeting, at the next meeting with the questions and answers for it.
Yes. Sure. Okay, perfect, thank you. Moving on to new business. I'd like a motion. Administration is recommending a motion to approve the district liaison officer agreement as presented. It's attachment 8A in your packet. May I have that motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second for discussion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Joanna. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have a copy of the district liaison officer agreement. Bill is here to speak to any portion of it that is needed.
Yeah, all I would say is this is the same agreement we've had last year. I would say, and I'm looking at one of my administrative colleagues because she's, Stacy, sorry, I'm bugging you a little bit, but
All right.
You're here, so I'm going to use the advantage of you being here. That this year, I would say we've had an increase in the quality of service that we have the past couple of years. And you can either agree or be quiet with me. I just know that from what I hear from my colleagues, and it's not just Stacy, sorry, I'm putting you a little bit on the
No, it's okay.
that we have seen an increase in quality this past year. But this is...
There's also been an increase in
calls. There's been a lot of increase in calls.
intensity of the call,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah. There's a 3% increase in cost, and that's the only change in this agreement, which is a $5,100 increase.
Because
Thank you. Any questions, Joanna?
My question would be, knowing the increase in cost and knowing the increase in intensity and the increase in calls, do you feel that there's anything that needs to be changed about the agreement before that's missing, lacking,
I haven't seen anything.
that wouldn't support, you know what I mean, what needs to be done?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. I mean, I've seen better response, and as I agree with Stacy from what I'm hearing from our team, we're seeing a real increase in severity. We're allocated 1.5 officers, and could we use more? Yeah. The city could use more police officers. We heard last week about the safety forum, so there is what there is, and that's kind of where we're at.
But what the agreement that we have right now, does it meet the needs for us, for our district?
So the answer is no, because we could use more officers, but I don't see us having the resources or them having the resources to fulfill it.
Okay.
Because it's only 1.5 FTE.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. And is it a full-time, it is one full-time?
It's one
officer now?
full-time.
Like last time I thought we didn't even have one.
We didn't. We now, this whole year, have been staffed with one full-time officer.
And we have a halftime of Lieutenant Tally is basically runs that call.
And
on
you
call for us.
think the calls to certain schools would obviously decrease if we put the school here for behavior?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure I can do a one-to-one correlation.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm not getting a sense of that.
I think it's kind of open
All right.
up place.
Any other questions? You ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying yes. Amanda?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Carly?
Yes.
Nilda votes yes, motion carries. Next item is the co and extracurricular guidelines. I'm looking for a motion to approve the co and extracurricular guidelines as presented in your packet as attachment 8B. Can I have that motion, please?
So moved.
Thanks, Jack. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mary Ann.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Discussion. I think Becky may be here to discuss this if we need it. Have any question?
Yes. So in FY24, we saw an increase in the K to 8 wage scales, as there hadn't been an update in a little over 4 years prior to that. There was a study completed to determine the time needed for each activity for BFA and NCTC. Subsequently, wage scales were adjusted a few years ago as a result of that study. FY24, there was a step advancement, and typically there's no step advancement provided in the following year. After collaborating with various building leaders, we made the following changes. We removed 8 positions, and we added 7 roles. We moved 2 positions from group 3 to group 4. That's the extent of the changes.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Any questions for Becky? Yes, sir.
Is there a cap on how many clubs or extracurriculars one person can advise or coach?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you said. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, I was wondering if there's a cap on the amount of clubs or extracurriculars and just in general that one advisor or coach can have. Just is there a limit?
There is, I can't tell you what that number is on the top of my head, but great question. I can get that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Ready to vote? Amanda?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Carly?
Yes.
Hilda votes yes. Motion carries. Is Tim Diaz here?
He's online.
He's
Was
online.
that a yes or no?
He's online.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good. So the next item is the Collins Pearly Sidewalk. This is an action item. Administration is recommending a motion to award the project of replacing the sidewalk at Collins Pearly to Gosselin Construction and Excavating in the amount presented. I need a motion, please, for that.
So moved.
Thanks, Jack. Second? Anyone?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, so discussion. We have Tim Vance here and also Bree that are both prepared to speak to this if necessary. Tim, you have anything to?
Yeah, just as you don't know, that Collins Pearly will have in the community thousands of visits every year. But unfortunately, sidewalks and curbs are badly needed repair, and we need to get that from a real safety issue. So I really hope we get this done this summer when the kids are gone.
Good point, thank you.
Yeah, and Mike Goslin and Ryan Magna have done the same type of work at city school and town school. They do an excellent job.
And Goslin does our storm rule too, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Bree, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, we did reach out to multiple vendors, and no, Goslin was the only vendor who was able to provide a quote to us.
Thank you. Does anyone have any additional questions? Hearing none, we're going to take a vote. Amanda?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes?
Suzanne?
Yes.
Carly?
Yes.
Nilda votes yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Those.
All right, next item on the agenda is a personnel issue. I need a motion to have a finding that if we were to discuss this topic in regular general session, it would put the board and or individuals at risk. May I have a motion for that, please? I'll make the motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Not really, we're just gonna vote on it. Amanda?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Suzanne?